Many a times, listeners, moments reshape us, not with fireworks, but with quiet clarity. Today, on this episode of the Mindful Journey podcast, we are sitting in that kind of moment, listeners. I'm Sana, as always, and this is the space, where we slow down, breathe, and get honest about how we bounce back, believe in ourselves, and make choices that actually stick. My guest, Martin Lucas, builds intelligence from the ground up, physics over probability, while studying how humans really decide. Well, he's a behavioral scientist, five-time author, and founder of Gap in the Matrix. More than the AI talk, this is about inner wiring, resilience, self belief, emotional intelligence, and how the brain's decision engine shapes the lives we lead. Interesting, right? So, listeners, let's get into the real. And Martin, welcome to the show. And I'm really, really excited for this conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I look forward to it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Martin, let's start with the understanding resilience, and especially in your research and your life. I'm really curious, like what turns a tough hit into resilience rather than resignation? I mean, if you can kind of, give an overview from your lived experiences and the researches that you have done.
Yeah, I find that the value of resilience and how people think about resilience is often misconstrued and misunderstood because it's very much like a muscle, right? It's an emotional muscle. It's a capability that we've got. And in my own life, like having done what I've done and had four businesses and heard the word no, this is not possible a lot more than yes, this is possible, right? For all the things that I've done, because that's the kind of things that interest me. I think that resilience is a real quality that um, should be in people's mindfulness, should be in their purpose, should be about how they think about things. Because I think that people give up a little bit too easily because they don't realize what's possible when they can learn what resilience is and then grow it as a muscle.
That is interesting. That is, I think, definitely an interesting reframe. Um, and if I would like to add to it, I think this is micro over the motivational, like as you very rightly said, it's many a times misconstrued, or kind of a misconception attached to it. And I think listeners, I would definitely like urge you to notice how Martin's framing makes resilience measurable, not something like this out of the world or mystical skill or concept out there. And Martin, if we talk about your work, like if you can take us to the season where deterministic AI was just a hunch, like what was the moment you almost walked away, and what, or maybe who pulled you back into it?
Yeah, it's a great thing. I started this 10.5 years ago with an idea that humans simply weren't understood by one another, that there was better ways to serve each other. And my big thing was about understanding how decision making works. And I probably had opportunities to walk away from this at least 1,000 times over 10.5 years because I was exploring something where you had to shoot across different academic disciplines. And as we know in the world is built on silos. So neuroscientists generally don't work with behavioral psychologists, and behavioral psychologists don't work with people that work in physics or work in chemistry, right? So um, that kind of like going back to resilience and pushing forward was always there. But really, it was in the past 3 years when I figured out that deterministic AI was possible and what AI as we know it, artificial intelligence and the large language models and your ChatGPT and Perplexity and all those ones were doing wrong. That's what really pushed me forward and gave me the motivation to finish what's been a decade's worth of work.
Well, that's quite a bold commitment in there. Very, very modern. And um, early on, like now, if we talk about self belief,
Mm.
Uh, how did you convert your self doubt into data? Because once again, that is something that generally we think that it's not measurable. Like, was there any personal experiment or client outcome that became your first undeniable receipt?
Yeah, that's a really good point because self-belief is very much like resilience, right? It's a muscle. It's something that you can increase to levels beyond what anyone thinks is possible of themselves. You don't want to go too far because, like everything in life, if you take self-belief too far, it can trigger the ego too much, can trigger arrogance too much. But again, most people are sitting in too much self-doubt. They think that they're the only person with fraud syndrome in the world, right? And we're all beset by different things of self-doubt with that. To answer your question, it's a great question. Today, I've done 120 million tests, right, across over 100 brands globally. We average 76% above the industry, mainly for marketing and sales. Going back to when I did the very first test, when I was so full of doubt after doing 2 years of work on it, I did the first test and we were 126% above what the brand had ever done performing on an audience. And that made me think, okay, all this weird stuff that I built for 20 years
Mhm.
is working. I'm onto something. So let's push forward. So the the
Okay.
the direct line to the 120 million test goes back to that first one. If I hadn't have seen that, I think I would have stopped because it had been 2 years, like self-funded, all that kind of stuff, and that takes a lot of effort and self-belief to get to that point. But then you need to keep refueling it, right? Because that's how the physics of energy works inside the brain.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Uh, did I hear it correct? Like 120 million, Martin? Did you?
Yes.
And oh
Yeah.
my good, that's quite a huge set. That's quite a huge set. I think this is so powerful for anyone building in the dark. That your confidence, it wasn't like a vibe we normally say about, but it was like a ledger. So that's quite interesting. Quite interesting. It's quite evident as well. Now another aspect, once again, it's a human aspect, and we often, there are different levels of discussions around this, particularly in the professional world or the business world. Emotional intelligence or EQ. Um, who challenged your thinking in a way that, you know, stung or maybe kind of initially made you really have self-doubt, and then it also sharpened you, and how did that conversation reshape deterministic AI?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the if I look at the 120 million tests and over 100 brands that I've worked with and all these numbers that sit behind it, what I've been fascinated about was I had two original problem statements to start exploring and understanding how decision making works within the brain. And one was what is emotional intelligence, and the other one was what is the philosophy of mind. Right. So when I looked at what is emotional intelligence, I felt that there was a huge gap in the world and that it just wasn't understood at all. What I've been amazed by is how little it's actually understood. I don't just mean in brands, I don't just mean in different cultures and different societies. I mean, in general, people don't understand what emotional intelligence is and how it's actually the largest factor about how we live life, how we engage with people, how we love, how we hate. All those different things come down to your emotional intelligence. But society's taught us that it's a rote learning world, right? So it's all about IQ. So even today, where people talk about emotions a lot more than what they used to, the world is a better than what it was 20 years ago. I still feel that emotional intelligence is like such a missing big skill to understand. And if you can understand it, you can grow it. That's the thing about all things about awareness, about how the brain operates and how your mind operates, is everything's growable if you have awareness of what it is.
Hmm. Hmm. So, not sure if it's a easy or tough question, Martin, but I have also been very inquisitive about how I can define emotional intelligence. I have had conversations on guests, talking about relational intelligence, just kind of, the next level of emotional intelligence. How would you define EQ, like especially in a business context? Or
So
yeah.
yeah, I mean the first of all, it's about how you interact with the world as an individual, right? So your emotional intelligence is how you read the micro signals on people's faces or micro expressions, which is like 76% of human communication happens by our expressions. And that goes flat on Zoom, right? So the reason why we feel a lot more fatigued since COVID and things is that we can't see the micro expressions when you're on video conference calls. It's just not
Mhm.
possible, right? So you lose
Mm.
that. So your emotional intelligence is how you read people, how you understand them, how you process emotions, how you have awareness beyond your own kind of fixed way of thinking to a degree, right? We've all got a fixed way of thinking. If we can't see what other people are seeing or think the way that they're thinking, then we're kind of stuck within that echo chamber, right? So emotional intelligence is all of those factors. Then to answer your question about how it works within the business world, it just simply doesn't exist. And I don't say that lightly, right? So 120 million tests, all these brands around the world, and nobody is looking at what is the emotional quotidian, what's the emotional thing that somebody's trying to get from an interaction with me. So if I'm a brand serving them software, if I'm a brand serving them fashion, if I'm a brand serving them beauty, whatever it is, we're not looking at the emotional context of what is in it for people. And that's why we operate 76% above the industry. That's what I've proven over 10 and a half years. But it was really difficult to get to this point because I've had to not talk about emotional intelligence in a business context because business people fear what they don't understand because they don't understand it as individuals. It's that kind of dichotomy of it all.
Hmm. Wow, that is surprising. That is surprising, Martin.
Mm.
Um, and now moving back to once again the human aspects in here, like identity. Um, you had quite a shift in there, like from probability to physics, of intelligence,
Mhm.
psychology of mind. What identity did you have to let go of to become the person who could found gap in the matrix? And how did that loss like physically translate in your real life, in your day-to-day practices, or in your thoughts, or even conversations?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I don't say this lightly. It was like a grieving process because you
Okay.
couldn't explore what was over 60 different academic disciplines about how the brain works, how it makes decisions, how it feels, all those things without uncovering loads of things about yourself. It's just a natural way, right? If you explore the brain, you're going to explore things about yourself. And it ended up being like a grieving process. When I was in kind of years 5 to 6, that was when I'd let go of a lot of things that I'd been carrying with me that I wasn't aware of all that. It's like a whole therapy session for self, right? So it felt like a grieving process because in the way that people talk about whether you call it being, hitting that level of awareness or being reborn or whatever it is, I went through that process. So I felt it was like a grieving process where you had to let yourself go. And that's really difficult for the brain. We talk about positive change, and I've done a lot of work on trauma and things like that, but the brain wants to hold on to what it knows, right? So change is actually one of the most difficult things for us to do when we're actively trying to rewire the most complex algorithm on the planet, which is our brain, right?
Yeah. Exactly, exactly. I think this also kind of, is sometimes this rewiring and identity shift. It kind of contradicts the fact that especially in our childhood, from the first 7 years, whatever experiences that our subconscious brain, part of the brain takes, it remains in there, and that kind of shapes the foundation of our further phases in our life, the way we react, the way we think, or the way we live. But I think this definitely, through your journey as well, I think listeners will definitely become aware of the possibility that yes, um, there can be shifts in our identity, but I think the kind of prerequisite is that you need to have that clarity and openness. It should not come from point of judgment, but it should come from a point of compassion as well. Like, I would love to know your thoughts on this, Martin.
I 100%, I 100% agree with you. I think that the only thing ever holding us back in life is not
Mm.
others, it's not circumstance, it's not where we were born, it's not families we were born into. All of those are factors, right? So, like, my journey was difficult because I wasn't handed things, right? But it didn't
Mhm.
stop me from doing those things. So, my point here is like all those factors that you throw in about life and woe is me and all that kind of thing, the only thing ever stopping you doing the things you want to do is you. That's the biggest obstacle that anyone can overcome. And if they can overcome it, then they're already on a journey to self awareness, right? Which is less about lots of thought leader books and more just about who do you want to be and what's stopping you doing that. And that's what I went through as a journey in Gap in the Matrix. To other people, I'd already had a successful career. That I'd had three businesses, I'd won lots of awards, I'd published books, things like that. But I hadn't hit a level of fulfillment of actually doing something that mattered to me and that I was super passionate about. And the only thing blocking me from doing that was me. And that's why I sold everything and did everything to create Gap in the Matrix. So I believe everything's possible if you give yourself the opportunity to believe that it's possible.
Yeah, and I think that definitely, um, I think for every one of us, it may feel like, we have barely scratched the surface because we have endless possibilities in there.
Yeah.
And very interesting, now let's also get practical here, Martin. Like if you can walk us through any moment or any day from your life when when you made a concrete decision, whether it's product or team or client or any aspect, where the physics lens changed your choice in the room or maybe someone else's as well.
I think for me, it was like when you understand the complexity, right? And you can make the complex simple. So if we look at how the brain operates,
Okay.
um, the physics of decision making, what comes into our body is the energy, right? The energy. So if we're spoken to in ways that we like, if we're sent emails the way that we like, we see ads for things that we like, it creates a certain type of energy. It resonates with us, right? And
Mhm.
once you realize that this energy, and I talk a lot about positive energy and things like that, the more positive energy you're putting into your system, the more positive experience you have as a person, that's well being. And when you've got that well-being, from that you create more purpose, more belief in yourself, more curiosity, and from curiosity is the biggest signal of intelligence, because when we're curious, that's when creation happens. That's when your brain starts to move forward and create things. And the funny thing about all those things that I've said is that you actually get to a point of stillness. And intelligence expands when noise stops and stillness reveals that kind of natural logic. And that's where the best ideas, that's why they happen when you're walking or when you're in the shower or things like that, is because you're letting your brain settle and think. So that for me was the biggest thing, is like once you can just let your well being and understand how to manage your own energy, then you're going to win always.
Hmm. Hmm. I love that. I love that. And I think I would urge all of our listeners to try this out. Like same meeting but different physics. Um, and before we wrap up, I think this also is a very interesting question. Like, Martin, your work, it implies structured determinism and human choice.
Mhm.
Now, on your hardest days, did that view risk flattening people into patterns? Like, how do you protect agency and compassion in your leadership? Not just your models, because sometimes, we are seeing in technology, framework, structure, checklist, and all. We are kind of, trying to look at everything through statistics or data,
Mhm.
but then I think the human element is sometimes get overlooked or ignored. So yeah, I would love to know.
Yeah, so inventing deterministic AI,
Okay.
the name kind of tricks you because it sounds deterministic, like it's got a set pattern, right? And actually, what
Yeah.
sits behind it is decision science and irrational mathematics, which is what I spent the 10 years modeling and doing all these different tests about, right? And what it does is it creates literally trillions of different combinations so that you then know how and what somebody's looking for from an experience and how to treat them. And that means that you're treating an individual as an individual. So all this stuff that we believe that brands know about us and know about us as consumers, and all this stuff that they do with invasive data and all this kind of third party data, is not real in terms of them understanding us at all. And I try to take as much of that as I can into my day-to-day life, because the phrase at the end of the day is do unto others as you do unto yourself, right? So treat others as you want to be treated. I'm not perfect at it. I don't think anybody is, but if it's in your mind, if it's in your consciousness, then you can optimize yourself to be the best person that you can be for others. And I think that's what matters in life more than anything.
Mm. Mm. And I think that's definitely a very I think it definitely it acts as a safeguard. Um, and before we wrap up, if our listeners they would like to explore deterministic AI, Martin, and would also like to connect with you to share their thoughts, their feelings from after this conversation, what would be the easiest way to do that?
Yeah, so if they're interested in reading more, then I'm on Medium under Martin Lucas. If they want to reach out to me, I accept any requests, anything that people are looking to understand. They can get me on LinkedIn, also under Martin Lucas, and that's at Gap in the Matrix. So, I welcome it all. I'm not out and about trying to promote the business. The business is going well. I'm more trying to spread the positiveness of energy and physics and things that I've figured out. So if I can help people, I'd love to.
Yeah, back to basics.
Right.
Good discussions. Yeah. I love that. I love that. And I would definitely personally welcome that shift as well in not only in the business or professional settings, but in personal settings as well. And I think what I'm carrying from your story, Martin, that it isn't a slogan, it is a sequence, um, a question, friction, and then first receipts, and then the identity shift, and then better decisions. And I think it doesn't happen overnight or in just a quick day or night. It will take its time. But I think deterministic thinking, it didn't make life easier, it made it clearer. So thank you so much, Martin, for bringing this up. Really, really refreshing and very interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So, listeners, yeah, what I'll do is I'll have all the links in the show notes along with this episode. So, just go there, refer to the show notes along with this episode on whichever platform you listen to your podcast to. Check out Deterministic AI, connect with Martin, check out his resources on Medium. And also, if today's discussion resonated with you, try one small move this week. Maybe run a micro experiment, log one clean proof point, or have the uncomfortable conversation that could upgrade your operating system. Until then, I'm Sana. This has been the Mindful Journey. We'll keep meeting you where you are and walking with you to what's next. Thank you so much.